Welcome to Module 3, Chapter 10. This chapter is on distribution, and I'm going to guess that this may be somewhat new to you, and this is really important stuff in healthcare marketing. So let's do it. Here are our learning objectives and things we're going to look at this, talking about channels and strategies involving channels and vertical marketing and channel leadership. All right, so what are we talking about? The channel of distribution. So that's the path a product takes as it travels from manufacturer to consumer. And so in our case, we're talking about services. And so there's some key decisions involved here. So how should it be distributed? Who is within the channel and what are each of them going to do? How's the market covered? And how can the channel be controlled? So let's look at healthcare. How does this start? So we've got these employees that are working for this company, and this company has a contract with this insurance company, often a managed care contract. So this is commercial insurance that we get through work, which covers about at least 50% of your market. So within that, we've got an employee that has a kid and the kid gets hurt. So what happens from there? So there are a couple different options. Maybe there's a clinic, maybe you have a pediatrician and you're going to go there. So that's one choice, or we could go directly to the emergency room. So you can see how that's two different channels right there. And so if it's the doctor, in either case, they may want to have some diagnostic imaging. So if it's a pediatrician, do they have an MRI right there? Or is there some MRI facility? Do they have a relationship with the hospital? Are they going to send the kid over to the hospital for the MRI? Or maybe they say, oh man, this is bad. You may need some surgery. You need to go directly to the hospital. I'm going to do a direct admit to the hospital. If you went the ER route, they may say, here's some stitches, you're fine. We're going to send you back to your pediatrician, okay, for follow-up care. They're going to take out the stitches. Or if it's something more serious, they may send to the diagnostic imaging. They may say, oh man, this is a severe compound fracture. You need to go to a specialist. So we don't need to admit you to the hospital, but we're going to send you over to this orthopedic surgeon. Go see him, make an appointment and see him in the next couple of days. Maybe the ER puts a cast on. And so these are all of different options here. It may be that the ER says, no, let's admit you for a couple of days. This was compound, there's some bone marrow, there's some clotting, throwing a clot issues, etc. In either event, any of these people may refer you to rehab. Who owns the rehab? Is that part of the hospital? Is that a separate group of therapists? Do they work for the orthopedic surgeon, etc.? And it's perhaps even, particularly if it's an elderly person, they may say, okay, and let's send you back home after any of these events, and you can get some home health and get you some physical therapy that way. So you can see that depending on who owns all these different pieces, what are their relationships, that you could go in a lot of different directions. And so this is the distribution channel. So from my perspective, I was the hospital. And so my goal was to control and market to all these different distribution channels to make them work for my system. Another way we may look at this is our book calls it the hospital care value chain. Actually, this is from a different book. And so you can see in this that we've got payers, we've got the fiscal intermediaries, providers, purchasers, and producers. Okay, so we have all these different folks involved. And so in marketing, what we're trying to do, you have to look at, so once again, I'm going to talk about this in terms of being in the hospital. So I was the hospital marketing person. How does a patient get to a hospital? They are admitted by a physician. A hospital does not admit a patient. You cannot have the corporate practice of medicine. It's a physician that admits a patient. So that they were our key agent and the key distributor for our services. So they were number one. But secondly, and as importantly, we needed to be in the network of the managed care organizations. And so, particularly at that time, the networks were a lot more exclusive than they are now, where a lot of people, a lot of hospitals are in the network. And so we were very aggressive in getting these managed care contracts. And so number one was our physicians here. Let's make them a 1. Number 2 was these fiscal intermediaries. But at the same time, we had both employers who were signing up for managed care plans that we were part of their network, and as importantly, individuals. And so they were number 3. And so how did we market to them? So the physicians, we were going out and visiting them. It was almost like a sales function. So there was relationship management, and we had a physician liaison that did direct sales. Managed care companies, that was a strong relationship management, and that was a contractual process. The individuals, what we tried to do was to make sure that their opinions of us, that we held that position in their mind that was positive. So their opinions were important, and in part we did that through branding. One of the things that we also knew was true was word of mouth was very important in healthcare. And so when we had patients came in, we really tried to manage that experience and that patient satisfaction so that when their insurance network and their physician, who may still have had a choice, said, I want to send you to that hospital, these people over here said, good, okay, that's okay, I want to go there. We did not want them saying, no, I don't want to go there. So you need to understand these relationships between your distribution channels, and then we look at marketing as to how to communicate and manage those relationships. So we look at that in terms of, are these direct channels or indirect channels? So in a direct channel, the producer directly to consumer. And so this may be a minor care center, this might be the emergency room, this may be a physician's office, versus in the indirect channel, there are these intermediaries. And so there could be some kind of wholesaler or retailer, if you will. So think in terms, a car is a really simple example of that. Ford Motor Company makes cars, but they don't sell cars. They sell cars to car dealerships. And so we've got in healthcare these people in between, and oftentimes it is these managed care organizations. One of the other channel or distribution questions is availability. So we talked a little bit about that with the mammography. We saw that that was an impediment to our customers getting their services because of our hours of operations. So most people, particularly if you're going after the working population, have certain times of the day and days of the week that they shop. So in healthcare also, we have to be available 24/365. Also access. So how easy is it to do a transaction? And so we see that the way that transactions are happening now is really different, and we're trying to do better at that in healthcare. And so we see even in this computer, really sharp, progressive people, facilities are looking for ways that where customers, for example, one of the things we did was we did an Ask a Nurse program. So something's going on, the kid has the earaches, the kid has a fever, I have this or that. So we had a hotline where the people could call and ask questions and get a physician referral if necessary. So the web is really changing things as well. I'm waiting for the day where, I can just go to the robot doctor. And if I can go to the robot doctor online, that would be even better. So with this, we look at our channel options here. And so with this, we've got some of our options. Some may be just exclusive, some may be selective, and some may be intensive. And so with this, we're looking in the exclusive. We've got a limited number of agents and who have control over the function. In number 2, the selective, we have a few intermediaries, but not everyone. And then in number 3, we have a lot of agents. So this is kind of a wide open market, if you will. So there's some information specifically about those. This table's in your book, and so you can look at it more specifically there, but synchronous versus asynchronous. So this is something you all know about. If you had to come to school to drive up to Boone to go to class, then there would definitely be a time utility trade-off going there. So we can look at these different attributes and synchronous versus asynchronous and look at some of these choices that we have there. So when we're coming up with a distribution growth strategy, we may make some decisions about distribution. So here's some examples. We could be multi-site, multi-service. So we could be a pizza restaurant and delivery. We see this in healthcare as there were a lot of, as I was talking about the Dallas market, a lot of hospitals downtown, and so they were forming these secondary sites in the more suburban areas. Sometimes that was more like a minor care center or urgency room, and so you would not have to drive downtown. You would go stay in your neighborhood, but if something was really serious, then you would get transferred downtown. Multi-site, multi-segment. I did not know that McDonald's owned Boston Market, but so it's trying to get into a little more home cooking type food there. Multi-service, multi-segment. So an example of that may be fitness center or spa. So as a hospital, maybe we have a fitness center. And so we would have to decide if we wanted to go into more spa type services as well. And we could be multi-site, multi-service, and multi-segment. And so I use this example of Baylor Hospital, big hospital there in Dallas. And so probably Carolinas would be an example here. And so Carolinas, as we know, is trying to get throughout the state of North Carolina, providing all different kinds of services and different levels of service for different clientele. So with all this, our goal is this channel management. So it's looking at the degree of distribution required, gaining channel cooperation, dealing with conflict. And so organizations have to decide of just how available the product's going to be to consumers. And do we need intermediaries? And we'll talk about this in a minute about conflict. So probably the most recent model that we see in this is the accountable care organization. And so you can see that this is where all the different services are coming together to manage population health, for example. But how these are organized can make a big difference. So once again, I'm generally coming from the hospital, the biggest provider. And so the hospital trying to put this organization together to put all the pieces and parts so that we can go to a managed care organization and or it could be Medicare, for example, or it could be Medicaid, and do some contracting to deliver on all of these services. Now, how those are organized, it could be different ways. Sometimes it's integration within a corporation, so Carolinas would be a good example there. Sometimes it's just coordination. There is not common ownership, but these groups have come together to work together, and another way would be contractual. So we're going to cooperate, and so if we go back to the previous line, we would see that there is a contractual relationship between all of those parties to work together in that accountable care organization. So there's some other things that are evolving with channels in healthcare. You may have heard some of, there are physicians that are trying to bypass insurance companies, and you just go and you pay them a monthly fee and they take care of everything that you need. And so here's some examples of that. Other ways are this company ZocDoc, and we have a video on that in the unit. And so maybe this would be more, it's somebody's trying to link buyers and sellers. And so Uber might be an example of that in transportation. So in healthcare or physician services, ZocDoc's trying to, I guess, be the Uber of healthcare. So let me just say this of not only for how you can be helping your organization right now, but I've had a lot of students in the past that are doing some very interesting work out there with these new companies that are trying to redesign healthcare. And that can be you too. So by the things that you're learning in all of these courses, and hopefully a little bit in this course as well, of thinking of things down the future. You know, how can this be reorganized? And what's your part in that as well? Now, as I mentioned, that sometimes there can be channel conflict. And so that's when one channel member has conflict in its goals and performance with another one. And so we saw this back in the day. We were trying to put together, really it was the same thing as an accountable care organization at that time, where we would go to the managed care companies and take global capitation for all services with the managed care organization. Well, my hospital's main admitter, responsible for about 40% of our admissions, was a large multi-specialty physician group. And so their vision was they wanted to be the channel leader. And they wanted to take the full cap and subcontract to us. We wanted to take the full cap and subcontract to them. So you can see that whoever had the full cap had the biggest control. And so sometimes you can have people that you've worked with historically, and when these the relationship of these the nature of these relationships change, it can create these kinds of conflict. So the question is, who's going to be the channel leader? And so if you are the channel leader, then you're the ones that's kind of calling the shots, if you will. And so this is always a challenge for us as hospitals because physicians obviously have equal importance, and they want to call the shots. They're getting more organized to do so. If you're in a fully integrated system where you're all working together, then that's kind of optimal. But as we still move forward in those directions, you can have these kinds of questions of who is the leader. And so how does it evolve of who's the leader? And so as always, that's going to be a question of who's got the power. And so there are different sources of power, and I'm sure you've studied this in your other courses as well. And so some of it, we always like to think it was because we had this wonderful expertise, and that we knew better. But I'll tell you, physicians think that they have a particular expertise as well. Sometimes, I think of this example of, we were doing some contract, and there was an anesthesiologist, very powerful, had a large group, and we needed him to do something in a managed care contract. And so the CEO was not really successful in getting this head of the anesthesia group to agree to something. So I came up and did all my analytics and had my charts and tables and data, and was trying to convince him, and I wasn't very successful. And so finally my bottom line was, I said, well, you know why you should do this? And he said, well, no, I really can't see any reason. I said, well, there's a very simple reason: because we want you to. And for some reason that had some appeal to him, so he ended up doing what we asked of him. But so this is a challenge of, you need to understand what your position is in any kind of dealing here. All right, so we've done a quick review of different factors of consideration and distribution channels, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with in your project.